Hello everybody, my name is Steve Strobridge. My company is called Florida Computer Care, and this presentation is called Security 101, How to Play Safe in the Connected Internet Era. And in this presentation, I'm hopefully going to educate you as to some ways to better protect yourself from online threats and attacks and all types of other nasty things that can happen to you and your computer. So let's go ahead and jump in and let's look at some statistics. And I heard a statistic somewhere that said about 80% of all statistics are made up. This probably fits in with that somewhere. But let's look at some of these numbers here. About 1 in 3 computer owners will completely ignore their system updates, and that leaves their systems vulnerable. About 1 in 4 computer owners have expired security software, and if your security software is expired, it is basically the same thing as having no software at all to protect you. And for those of us who do have security software that happens to be up to date, about 30% of us are still going to have malicious content and malicious activity happen on our systems that will go completely undetected by our security software. And another thing too, for those of you who have offices with lots of visitors, just be aware of this. When you allow people on your Wi-Fi, you're exposing yourselves to threats. So that's some basic security information, some basic security knowledge right there. So if it sounds a little scary, you might be saying to yourself, well, what can I do? And unfortunately, there is no single answer. There is no silver bullet. There is no complete holy grail solution. So the best thing you can do is you need to stay informed, and you need to try to follow best practices to protect yourself. A good guideline is if something seems suspicious, do a little homework before you open something. And the mantra of this video, the takeaway phrase that you should walk away after watching this is look before you click. Very important stuff, and you'll see why as we dig through here. Now, before I get into the security side of this and talking about security threats and talking about how to prevent security threats, let's look at something even more important, and that's actually backing up your computer. Because the only way to completely guarantee that you're going to recover from a severe malicious attack is to have a backup of your critical data. There is no software that provides complete guarantees or complete coverage. So you should be backing up. One of the best ways to back up, depending on the number of computers you have in your budget, would be to have a hard drive directly attached to your computer running software. These hard drives now, for about $100, you can get about a 2 terabyte hard drive. A lot of these hard drives come with their own software, their own kind of custom backup software that will come with the hard drive. Many versions of Windows have the ability to back up. The Mac has the ability to back up. But a product that I use and I recommend is actually called Acronis. I'll touch more on that towards the end of this presentation as well. But very important to backing up your system. The best way to back up when possible is to back up to a direct attached hard drive similar to what you see in the picture here. Now, an alternate strategy or a secondary strategy might be to use an online backup solution or a cloud backup solution. And there's a couple of ones you've probably heard of. Carbonite, probably one of the more well-known names that you've heard of. Another one's called Mozy. Acronis also has a cloud offering with their backup software as well. And so cloud backups are a great thing, and in a perfect world, I would suggest you use a cloud backup as a secondary backup and have your primary go to a direct attached physical hard drive that you have with you. If you have no other option, and this has to be your plan A, having this backup is better than no backup at all, but it's critical that you should have a backup. Why do we want to have a backup? Well, if you accidentally delete a file, if your computer crashes and you lose everything, and in the worst case scenario, when you have a really bad virus outbreak or some crypto stuff that encrypts all your files, when you reach these situations, the backup is sometimes your only way to recover, and not having a backup is sometimes meaning you've reached a worst case scenario that you cannot recover from. So I cannot stress enough, how important it is to back up, and it's not as expensive or complicated as you would think it is. So let's say you have an office, a small home office or a large home office, and you've got a bunch of computers that you would like to back up, and you don't want to manage a bunch of individual hard drives plugged into all these machines. Well, you might want to do something like this, a network backup hard drive. These are called NAS drives. NAS stands for Network Attached Storage. This is a picture of a really inexpensive one. There are a lot of companies that make things like this. So Western Digital makes these, Seagate makes these, a lot of companies make these, and it's basically a hard drive you plug into your network. It shows up like another computer on your network, and you can configure all of your computers to back up to this device like a big giant backup bucket. And these are relatively inexpensive too. Right now you can get something like a 4 terabyte network backup drive for significantly less than $200, probably in the area of about $150 for 4 terabytes of network storage. So that might be a cost-effective way to get a lot of people backing up to one location. So that's something else to consider. Now let's get into the security aspect of this. What is a security threat? Well, if you're old school, you're probably used to the term virus. My computer has a virus. I've gotten a computer virus. Well, the term virus has kind of been replaced now with a generic term that's called malware, which stands for malicious software, because what we used to literally consider viruses are really a small percentage of the attacks we see nowadays in the online connected world. So what are some different names for different types of malware we can get? Well, there's lots of them. This isn't all of them, but we've got things like spyware and adware and junkware. There's rootkits, there's botnets, there's trojans, there's worms, there's keyloggers. Oh my, there's a bunch of different ways that names of nasty things that can attack your computer in one way or another. Another thing that is slightly less malicious but still kind of shady are what we call PUPs, or potentially unwanted programs. This is what I like to call stowaway software. This is software that installs itself along with other things that you intentionally install, and I find it to be kind of a shady practice. And this is also a way where a lot of times unwanted and potentially harmful software can make its way into your computer, and I'll show you some examples on what to look for and how to hopefully avoid some of these potentially unwanted programs as well. So this is usually when I get a call, is when somebody has a bunch of pop-ups like this, right? All these pop-ups here. Your computer is ready to back up, and congratulations, free cloud backup service is now ready. And there's this other thing in the background that's popping up saying that we're going to fix your registry problems, and this is all bogus, malicious software telling you it's trying to do something good for you, and by the time you see all of these, you've gone horribly wrong and you've done something to let a bunch of crap in your computer. And that's typically when my phone rings, and luckily things like this are pretty easy for me to fix. So this is the aftermath of bad practicing and bad habits on your computers. Let's look at how we can avoid some of this on our screens. So how do we get infected? Well, opening up emails. Opening up email attachments, reading emails is a common way that malicious software is spread. Visiting websites, even trusted websites. Sometimes the advertisements in our websites, the sidebar ads, sometimes contain some kind of shady content that is otherwise presented to you on a website that's not a shady site. Search results. Believe it or not, the really common way for you to get to a bogus website is to search for something legitimate and end up going to a website that looks like you're in the right place but gives you bad information, gives you bad content. File sharing. If you swap flash drives, if you swap external hard drives, if you're sharing over a network, if you're sharing over something like Dropbox, this is a way contamination can spread. So anything that exposes your computer to a foreign element puts you at risk. And because we're all connected to the internet, because we're all connected to our home and office networks, it's something that is inevitable, right? So how can we be best educated to reduce our exposure to this is what I'm going to hopefully cover for you. So what is one way that email becomes a big threat to us, and how is email a threat? Well, what happens a lot is that people's email accounts get hacked. And they're hacked by systems. Nowadays, we don't think of a hacker as just one person typing away on a keyboard trying to randomly guess your password. It would take that person millions of years to guess one password. So hacking is done by software, and hacking is very sophisticated, and hacking runs on networks that are known as botnets, where infected computers all work together to help this software crack more passwords. And so very often the big companies like your AOLs, your Yahoos, MSNs, AT&Ts, Bell South, Hotmail, all these different types of things now, these are the guys that get hacked. And when your email gets hacked, it's not happening in your house. It's not happening on your computer, and it has nothing to do with whether or not your computer is running antivirus software. It's happening on the internet, and it's beyond your control. Now, what happens once you get hacked is the first thing that these software will do is they're going to log into your account, they're going to go through your address book, and they're going to spam every single person in your address book with a link to malicious software that's going to help try to spread the hacking software to more people so they can hack more people. So the best thing you can do is to try to have good practices with your passwords, right? So this is an example of what your inbox might look like when you get a bunch of software from weird people. When you see subjects like this, forward news, hey, how are you, right? Here's an email I got from myself at one point in time, life-saving moment. Equifax, check your credit score, right? So a lot of times these things look legit, right? And so these emails that we click on here are often the first step to let malware into our system. Here is what one of these messages looked like. The subject was forward hi. And this was the body of the message. Hey, how are you? And hey, people say this really works. Click here, right? And whatever you're going to click on at this point here is probably going to take you somewhere that's going to screw up your system. So getting these weird emails from people that you think you trust, because guess what? You're in their address book. You know them. They know you. So you're getting an email from somebody you know. You might be tempted to click on it, but look at the subject, right? Forward hi. How many of your friends start off an email by saying, hey, people say it works, right? I don't know who your friends are, but my friends don't talk this way, right? So this might be a clue just by looking at the content of the message that this might be something I might want to think about before I click on, right? So what are some of our best practices? Well, you should change your password somewhat frequently, maybe monthly, at least a couple times a year. Don't use the same password for every website. This is important because as creatures of habit and creatures of inconvenience, we want to remember one password, and we want to use that password everywhere so we don't have to go crazy remembering this. But guess what? If the password you use for the email is the same password you use for all of your other websites, and your email just got hacked, somebody knows your email address and your email password, and they can use that to try to get into any other website, including your bank accounts or other bank accounts. And they're not going to try to do it themselves again. These aren't people punching away on keys. They're going to plug it into software that's going to automatically try to log into anything and everything on the world with your username and password. So the minute your password's been exposed, you're at a much larger risk than you think you are. So the best thing to do is don't use the same password for every site, especially financial stuff. I would have a separate password for secure financial websites that's different from email, for example, right? If you get an email from somebody you haven't heard from in a long time, don't click on anything. Call them and say, hey, what's up? I got an email from you. Everything okay? Or, I'm not sure if you were hacked or whatever, so I just wanted to talk to you before I open up this email. That's a really good thing here. You got to use good judgment before you click on things, right? You really got to look at it. You really got to think about, is this important? Is this real? And is this worth the risk if I click on it, right? So just things to think about. Think before you click. Look before you click. Another common thing that happens now are hoax emails. And hoax emails are part of a scam that's called phishing. And phishing is the same concept of when you go fishing, you throw out in the water a whole bunch of times and you're hoping that one of those 100 casts might bring in a real fish. The same thing here. They're going to send out emails and things to hundreds, if not millions of people and hope that a few of them will actually fall for it here. So there's a lot of emails and websites that look like they're legitimate, but they're actually fronts for hacker sites that are going to steal your information. And so a lot of times you're going to get an email saying something like, hey, we need you to reset your PayPal account. Click here to reset your PayPal account. You go to a website, you put in your PayPal username and password. Guess what? you just gave away your information, right? Because you went to a scam site. So once again, be careful on the emails that you get, even when they look like they're coming from trusted, legitimate sources. And I'll show you in a minute how to look at a link and tell if a link is going to where it says it's going to. So how can we avoid this? Well, one thing you can do is you can hover over these links. And when you hover over a link, and I'll show you a picture of this in a second, it's going to put up a little pop-up or a little tooltip that's going to show you where that link is going. And if it looks funky, don't click on it. Another thing I'm going to show you here in just a second is searching, right? So a lot of times we search for things to get somewhere. Even though we know we want to go to Yahoo, sometimes we end up searching for Yahoo, or we want to go to our bank and our bank is Chase Bank or whatever. We're going to search for Chase Bank when really, if you had just typed in chase.com, you would have gotten there and you would have guaranteed you got to the right spot. So this is an example of an email that came in looking like from the United States Postal Service with a link here that says, hey, click here to print your shipping label. If you were to hover your mouse over this link here, this little box would pop up here, and look at the message here. This is going to a website that's called strongers.ro, and then it's got a whole bunch of weird stuff after that, right? So if you hover over a link and look at the actual location where that link is going to take you, that might give you enough information to say, you know what, nowhere in this address does it say USPS.com. This is not legit. I'm going to go ahead and trash this email, right? So that's just one example of looking at a hover. Here's another one. This was a very common scam going around for a little while. I've got a Google document I'd like to share with you. Click here to view your Google document. A lot of people share files with Dropbox and Google Docs with people. And again, when you hover over the link, what you end up seeing here is that where it's going to has got nothing to do with Google Docs. Whatever this domain name is here is an illegitimate site, right? So if you hover over the link and look for this information, that might help you make an informed decision before you actually click on it, right? Now here is the difference between the search bar and the address bar, right? So the address bar is usually in the top of your browser, and this is where you could actually type in google.com or yahoo.com or chase.com. And when you type it in the address bar, it will automatically take you to that site. When you click in the search bar, you're going to get a list of search suggestions of sites. And this is where most of the scams come from, is that the people who make these bogus websites have figured out how to get very high in the search rankings, and the illegitimate sites sometimes appear higher in a search than the legitimate ones are for. And here's an example here. Perfect example. I've had people have this problem before with Firefox, right? So Firefox is a web browser. And if you typed in Firefox to a search engine here, the first option to get Firefox was not the legitimate Firefox site, right? So downloadzone.org. Don't know what it is, but it's not the actual source of Firefox. The second choice here is actually Firefox. So Firefox happens to come from a company called Mozilla, and the actual website for Firefox is mozilla.org. Not everybody knows that, so you might want to click on the one here that says, hey, download free Firefox. Here's one that says getfirefox.net. That sounds cool, but that's not the right source. This is just one example of how searching for things can take you to a bogus website that's going to lure you into divulging information that's then going to come back to haunt you, right? So just something to think about. Phone scams, right? And there's two ways phone scams work. A very common way is that you're going to receive a phone call. And let me clue you into something. Microsoft, AOL, Google, these people don't make house calls. They just don't. They're never going to call you and say, hey, we've noticed you've got a virus on your computer and we're calling to help you fix it. So anytime somebody calls you out of the clear blue telling you that they want to help you with your system, they're lying. They're absolutely lying to you, okay? And so if you need to call somebody, you need to make sure you get it from a trusted source. And I'm going to give you an example of that in just a second. Do not do a web search for the phone numbers for Google support, Microsoft support. So be very wary, be very concerned about anybody who you let come into your computer. That is a scary thing. So when somebody calls you, I can almost guarantee you 99.99% 99% of the time, it's a scam, it's a hoax, it is not legitimate, and you should not talk to them or give them any information whatsoever. Now, what happens on the other side of this? What happens if you are making the call yourself? Let's say you've got a problem with your AOL account. Well, if you recall when I showed you searching for Firefox, that the first results for Firefox was not Firefox, the same thing is true with support sites. So if you go to search for AOL help or AOL support or Google help or HP support, most of the times you're going to get a list of websites that are completely illegitimate, and these are people that are just sitting there waiting for you to call. They're scammers waiting to give you fake support. So now you've called them. Now you think you've called somebody legitimately. So don't use a web search. Instead of searching for it, go to the website. So if you need support from Hewlett-Packard for your printer, go to hp.com, and from the HP website, then look for a link for support or a link for contact phone numbers. But a web search will almost guarantee you the wrong information, and it's going to take you to a bogus website. So once again, I can't stress the importance of just being careful on who you let log into your computer. All right, let's talk about probably the worst possible thing that can happen to your computer, possibly the worst case scenario ever. And this is what we call the ransomware or the encrypted file virus, the crypto blocker, crypto wall. There's a million names for this, but this is usually the worst thing that happens. Most of the time, if somebody calls me and tells me they've got a run-of-the-mill virus or some type of malicious software, I would say that 90% of the time, I can get rid of 90% of your garden variety malware. This is the exception. Ransomware is just about impossible to recover from. Now, there are a bunch of different tools and companies and utilities that say they can possibly decrypt your files for you, but the reality of it is that it is a long shot at best. And so what happens in this situation here? You get infected with this particular type of malware. It has now encrypted all of your files, all of your important file types, documents, PDF files, spreadsheets, pictures, video clips, audio clips. Every common file type has now been encrypted, and it can't be opened. And you'll usually get some type of warning. There'll be a pop-up on your screen, or your web browser will be redirected telling you that you're now the victim of this attack, and that now you have to pay a ransom. And the ransom is also kind of time detonated as well. The first time you open up that page and you see what the ransom is, they usually give you only a couple of days before the ransom starts to go up. So at the end of the day, your best bet to recover from this situation is to make sure you have frequent good backups of your information. Obviously, having good security software may or may not help prevent this problem, but without a backup, you typically are going to be looking at one of two situations. One of them is either you pay the ransom, and sometimes you pay the ransom and you actually are able to decrypt your files. Sometimes you pay the ransom and you just got screwed twice. Or you say, you know what, I've lost everything. That is usually the reality. So my best advice to you, besides having good security software, is back up your computer. It's just not worth the risk not to do this. What else is worse by this? How is this problem compounded? Well, if you are sharing files across a local network with, say, a file server, one person who gets infected with this crypto wall will then the virus is going to reach out to every other thing it can find on the network. So if you're connected to a server, it will now start encrypting the server as well. If you've got an external hard drive that you backed up your files on, it might start encrypting those files too. So as much as I'm telling you, you should have a backup, you want a backup that's going to save your files in a non-standard format. You don't want your files saved in a normal folder structure because they will get automatically encrypted as well. So you want your backups to do something that saves all your files together in a different type of file that's not recognized by these crypto things. And so another problem too is I've seen is that customers that I've had that have had this type of virus that have used something like Dropbox. If any one person got this crypto file, their Dropbox also got encrypted, and everybody they shared the files with also now got encrypted too, because Dropbox just keeps resynchronizing things. So this thing not only screws up the computer it's on, but it looks for everything else it can get its access to. Any directly attached hard drive or any other thing it can find on the network, it is also going to encrypt, and the problem will just continue to spread. So it is wicked nasty. And this is kind of a picture of what some of these things look like. You might get a pop-up on your screen saying your files are encrypted and here's where you go to decrypt it. And most of the times they want you to pay your ransom now in Bitcoins, because Bitcoins is basically an untraceable type of virtual currency, so you'll never know where your money went. And guess what? Bitcoins aren't easy to get on the spot either, because I did have a client one time who actually had to pay this ransom, and trying to get Bitcoins at the last minute is not an easy thing to do. So this is a tricky situation. So again, best advice, make sure you have backed up, make sure you've got frequent backups, thorough backups, and possibly different versions of backups, including direct attached, online backups, network backups. You want to have your stuff backed up as frequently as possible in a variety of different ways, in a variety of different places, to properly recover from this should this happen to you. When it comes to security software, there's a bunch. This isn't all of them, but there's a bunch, right? So we got Norton, McAfee, Kaspersky. They're just all over the place, right? So there's a ton of different companies that make antivirus software. Now that we're in 2017, most of these companies will or should specify that they also include ransomware protection in them. You really want to find something now that has real-time ransomware protection. Very important feature to look for in security software. What do they cost? They average between, I don't know, $30 and $60 per computer per year. The important thing to realize here is that security software needs to be renewed annually and updated annually. A lot of times people don't realize this because they bought a brand new computer and it came with a 30-day or a 90-day trial. And so they say, yeah, my computer's got antivirus. I see the little logo right there. I see the icon. It's there. But after 90 days, if they didn't pay the money to actually buy the subscription, it stopped updating. It's now worthless, right? And then another thing too is a lot of these security things have what's known as an all-in-one suite, or an internet security suite that tries to do everything. And I've found that sometimes the bigger the program, not only the less effective it becomes, but the more it starts to slow down your system. So sometimes I actually recommend you do something like running a layer and running two different programs that play well together, and have two different products to try to layer your security. And so a good one that has been traditionally well respected and provided a good level of protection is a product that's called Malwarebytes, right? So Malwarebytes is something that you could either run it by itself or you could run it on top of an antivirus software. So even if you had like a very simple, basic, free antivirus software, if you ran that and you ran Malwarebytes on top of that, the combination of these two products sometimes offers a better level of protection than one of these all-in-one products. So sometimes you might want to play around with different programs to see if you can stack up your security a little bit differently and maybe have a little bit higher level of resiliency. So now that we're in 2017, as I mentioned, a lot of our over-the-counter security and antivirus softwares, they are now making this a feature, a standard feature. So you really want to look for this. If you're going to be looking into buying a security product, you want to look at all the features and details of what it offers, and you want to see it spelled out that it has real-time active ransomware protection. Very important feature. And if it doesn't find this and you can't find it, either call them and get some confirmation on this, or look for a different product. Now, I just did some recent research, and some of the most best rated products that are doing this right now, one of them is Bitdefender 2017. So Bitdefender's got like 3 or 4 different versions of their software, but even their most basic version, all versions of Bitdefender have ransomware protection real time built into them. Malwarebytes Premium is the current version of Malwarebytes. That retails for $40. You might be able to find it cheaper somewhere. And so that one also has real-time ransomware protection in it. And now Acronis as well. So I mentioned I like Acronis as a backup product. So Acronis, the latest version of Acronis, which is called Acronis TrueImage 2017, not only does it provide that important backup component that you need, and by the way, their backups are stored in a file that is not recognized by ransomware, so the backups themselves won't also get encrypted. But Acronis also has a feature It does provide active protection against ransomware, and it looks for files that are trying to be changed. So it is really adding a security component to the backup software. So not only do you have the ability to recover should your files become encrypted, but even better yet, this active protection, this real-time protection, really tries to prevent the encrypting of the ransomware before it ever happens. So these are just a couple of options you might want to look into to try to reduce your risk of this ransomware, because the best case scenario if this happens is if you've got a backup. And I've had clients who I manage who I was able to recover them via backup. I've got some of my clients who did not have a backup, that they either had to pay the ransom or they had to say, well, we lost everything. So this is nasty stuff. This is literally one of the worst things that can happen to your computer. We're going to switch gears now to slightly less dramatic, and we're going to talk about some of your potentially unwanted programs, or what I like to call stowaway software. And this is an example of how these things get in here. You're going to do something like a Java update, and a Java update is necessary. I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that you have to update your systems. If you're not updating your systems, you're vulnerable. Well, Java also needs to be updated, but what Java does is they will often allow other companies to add their goods and services into the download package, and this is what I find to be kind of a shady, unsavory business practice to do this, because again, we are creatures of habit. What we want to do right here is just click next, 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 next. That's what we do. What we would need to do is actually uncheck these three boxes here to say, no, do not install this toolbar, and do not do this, and do not do that. You actually have to look before you click, and then you would hit next after you uncheck those. Here's another one, right? Adobe Flash Player. Adobe Flash Player, again, this is going to become less of an issue because most of our modern browsers have Flash built in, but if you're still using Internet Explorer, for example, you still need to download Flash as a separate file. And so once again, this Adobe Flash Player wants to install this McAfee Security Scan Plus, which is just more crapware to get in your computer. So you would have to uncheck the yes, basically saying, no, I don't want this, and then do your update, right? So that's just one example of how this stuff can get in here. So sometimes we are looking for something legitimate, and then a few things tag along, and this can compound itself pretty quickly. This is a list of a real computer with a bunch of caca in here. Okay, this VO package, Search Protect, Optimizer Pro, Any Protect, Extended Update, Wise Enhance, My Backup, Norton Security Scan, the Bing bar, you don't need these. This McAfee Security Plus, PC Tools Registry Mechanic is a bogus one. Shopping Helper Smart Bar Engine, Facebook Video Calling, Shopping Helper Smart Bar. There's just tons of things that got in this system here. And this doesn't happen overnight, but this just happens by not looking before you click, and just by downloading anything and everything and just letting the entire world get into your computer. You got to be really careful when you start downloading things and looking for things. So what do we want to look out for? What's some of the crap we want to try to avoid? Well, toolbars, search bars, you want to avoid those. Anything that talks about coupons, rebates, or savings, most of those are really bogus and sometimes downright malicious. Any type of search engine helper, especially one that was called the Conduit search engine. I'm not sure how common that is now, but a year or two ago, that was wicked bad stuff right there. Avoid looking for free software. So if you're looking for free converters, if you need to convert a JPEG, or if you need to convert a file to a PDF, or you need to be able to download a video from YouTube, or convert an MP3, and you search for free, those search words and those keywords are what show up on the top listings of our search engines, and most of the time you're going to get a bogus website that's going to let you download a program that looks legitimate, and it's going to have a whole bunch of friends come along with it. That's how you're going to end up with something like we saw here, searching for one of these free programs and getting a bunch of other crap that comes with it, right? So look out for anything that says it's an optimizer, it's security, or tune-up software. If you see the software in your computer and you don't ever remember installing it or purchasing it, it's probably crap and it's potentially malicious, and these are things you want to look for to get rid of and to uninstall. So that is kind of the end of the discussion there. So how do we conclude this? How do we wrap this up? How can I summarize all this for you? Well, you want to make sure you've got valid security software. You want to make sure whatever you have is the latest version, has all the latest updates. You run regular updates. You run regular scans. You want to be aware of some of the things I've told you about today. How to know when somebody's sending you a scam email or a bogus email, how to know if you're getting a hack, bogus scam phone call, right? Things to look out for. Look out for some of this potentially unwanted software, and most importantly, make sure you back up your systems. I can't stress that enough. And then last but not least, look before you click. My best advice for you to help reduce the risk of clicking on something nasty. And there you have it. So I'm Steve Strobridge. My company is Florida Computer Care. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. If you need anything else, hit me up and let me know. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.